Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another quick episode. As you are probably aware, Cristina and Julia and I had delegations this past Monday. All these delegations at the Waterloo District School Board I've made public on my YouTube channel. And you can hear Christina's delegations, Julia's delegation, and my delegation, including the question period afterwards. This was probably one of the spiciest nights in the Waterloo District School Board committee of nights, and I'm kind of excited to talk about it. First of all, welcome Cristina and Julia, and I wanted to do a quick summary of the delegations. You can have a look online and you can listen to the whole thing. Cristina, if you want to start off, quick summary, and let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, David. Summary of the last delegation was kind of a continuation of a bunch of other delegations and also messages to the board. But since Cindy Watson has a motion going through, it still hadn't gone through, actually. It was supposed to go through this last meeting. It's postponed now. But it was basically just kind of safeguarding, and I don't know exactly what it means, but it's more to safeguard the books, the literature, the material, and more age appropriateness. I mean, I think some of us would contest that some of the material probably isn't necessary or beneficial to our students, and that maybe we could probably find some better information that's still thought-provoking and, will teach that critical thinking and teach, life experience and all of that as well. It's not that we want to get rid of any of that. So it kind of feels like we're having different conversations, but I think we'll talk more about that. But mine was basically going through supporting the motion, Cindy's motion, to minimize the risk to access inappropriate content and potentially harmful content to our kids. I went through a little bit. I mean, you got it. These delegations, 10 minutes. I mean, I'm grateful for the 10 minutes, I gotta say. At the same time, I mean, I start with probably 30 minutes worth of a speech, right? And then you have to cut it down. So really chopping stuff down, and it's really taking away the nuance from it. And so I really appreciate these types of things. I think we need to do them more often, but, kind of touching upon their own policies and procedures that they have they're not following them, right? So we can talk a little bit about that. Last time I spoke on the 13th, we had a trustee basically state, that, it's, up to the ministry to decide. They don't even know their own policies and guidelines. Like it isn't the ministry that sets supplementary resources for our kids. This is a board decision. I'm going to go on a tangent because it just makes me think about your delegation and how you're being called out for not reading a book, yet they don't even know the policies. But anyway, so it was that, and then touching a little bit about that open letter again. I wanted to say a lot more about the open letter, and I did. I cut it. Once I got to 17 minutes, I'm like, I don't want to cut this out, but I have to. But again, just kind of, you came forward. I forget the date of yours, the 16th, I think, of January. It's George's birthday, so that's how I remember. But so it, it was like you're basically saying, why are you facilitating child abuse? And that's a tall call. But instead of taking it seriously, like they're saying with their words that they take it very seriously, the only thing they really did was say that they're not doing it. And it's the only evidence that they have to support that is by nullifying your complaint. So basically saying this parent is wacko and far right and is trying to cause harm, and therefore don't worry about what he's saying. And, I think that we'll go into, what the two tall tales were from this last meeting. I want to hear what you guys came out from it. But so it was basically going through that, and then, doing some research in terms of what does the literature say? What is some of these organizations that look out for our kids, specifically when it comes to sexualization and violent content, and what do they say about it? Like I talked to, John Mueller as well, who has a lot of so much experience, probably more so than than anyone, at least in North America or probably the world, in terms of, you know, how sexualization impacts the psyche and then in terms of predators and that sort of thing. And, you know, I don't know why we're lowering the bar so much when it comes to protecting our kids. And so that's kind of where I was at when I was looking for, like, what's the potential harm? I mean, if there's benefit, let me know. Let me know what the benefit is. What's the potential harm? And so just kind of looking at some of those potential harms and what's important when we're like evaluating the resources that come in, and are we even following that in the board? Like, are we following age appropriateness? Are we following, you know, individualized tolerance for graphic content and visual text? You know, some kids are really visual. Like, it really impacts them. And I don't know that we're actually taking this into account. Have we looked into alternatives? Like, if the message is really important, what are some other ways we can teach these things without having graphic text and visual pictures? Yeah. And so those are kind of the things. And then if it's necessary, I really want to know, like, if it's necessary, like, how do you deem it necessarily? What's the relevance of it? And how do you go about deciding that? So those are kind of the questions I had. I think they're reasonable questions, but apparently they're not even enough to be forwarded. You know, Cindy asked to have my questions forwarded. I think this is the other thing that the viewers really need to understand is what's happening here is that you spend all this time as a parent. This is not my job, right? Like, I've got my own job, and like, you spend all this time to articulate something in 10 minutes that I would like to have a one-on-one conversation, or maybe just sit and have a dialogue with these people, you know, but you make it into 10 minutes, which again, I'm grateful for. And then you pose these questions and then you get basically, you know, harassed at burnt at the stake with their questions that they're not questions that are looking for solutions or understanding. It's more to grill you, which is what I felt at the last meeting. I don't know how you felt, David, but that's what I was feeling. And you know, and I didn't even get the answers, like, and not even forwarded to staff to find the answers for me. It's like I'm just confused in terms of who's paying for public education and what it all stands for. So I don't know if that's a good summary, but that's basically it.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. I do have thoughts on the questions as well. I'm going to get into it a little bit more. But Julia, you have a very interesting delegation as well, calling them out on their own procedures and hypocrisy. So why don't you give a quick summary of your delegation and your thoughts on how it was handled?
Definitely. So I did a delegation on Monday talking about social transition. And social transitioning is names and pronoun. So this is when a child indicates at school that they wish to go by the opposite pronouns or other pronouns than how they were assigned and use a different name. And this is something that Waterloo Region District School Board has a policy on, like most school boards do. And particular in their policy, I wanted to highlight the provision that for students who are under 16 years old, if they don't want their parents to be included in knowing what's happening, then the school will withhold this from telling the parents. And for me, that was really what I wanted to focus on. Transition is complicated. I have been through one. And for myself, I'm not looking to put up an argument that kids should never be able to transition at school. I think this is complicated. I think that there are really good points being brought up on both sides about whether transition is helpful or not. When you go to the medical community, you can see a lot of people having a lot of these discussions, and there isn't consensus. But what there is consensus on is that this is not a neutral act. When you do start a social transition, you are taking a step, and there are implications of that. And what I find truly mind-boggling is that we are allowing this to happen behind the parents' back. And we're not just saying the parents may not know. We're saying we're going to take great steps to make sure the parents don't know. The guidance that the school board has outlines what you should and shouldn't do in terms of where you should write it, what you should put on the report cards, so that the parents don't know that this is happening at school if the kid has indicated that they don't want that shared. And for me, that's really concerning. And I say that from personal experience. I didn't go through a transition when I was a child, but I wanted to. So I know how I felt at that point, and I know how I felt about my parents not knowing. And I don't think that's helpful in many cases. And of course, there's been lots of talking about this online since the delegation, and people love to fixate on, but what about households where there's a safety concern? What happens if there is truly a concern in a household where a kid may be harmed at home, physically harmed, if this were to come out? And unfortunately, those households do exist. I would love it if that wasn't the case and we could say that doesn't matter because those households aren't real, but those households are real. And I know that that is something that has to be kept in mind. What blows my mind here, though, is that we are acting as though we don't have a solution for those situations. Any interaction at school could result in harm for a child at home. Anytime you call home and say that your child skipped school, or you send a report card that has a bad grade, what if harm occurs? What if this is a household where there's a parent who's going to take a physical action in response to that? And there are those households out there, and we have a solution, which is if we suspect harm and abuse, and there's guidance for teachers on how to determine that, then we include Children's Aid Services, because they're the ones who have the ability to go into the household, to support the household, and to understand, is there a concern? Sometimes kids may think there's a concern and there's not a concern. Other times, kids know there is a concern, and we have an agency that is able and willing to support in that way. But in this particular domain, for some reason, we've decided we shouldn't utilize that. We should just withhold it.
I find it very interesting what you said, because I agree. Because the conversation is forced one way and kids are openly talking about it and normalizing it, I think it's very difficult to distinguish real abuse from just normal talk right now. Because if I saw a kid at school and they started talking about all these sexual things, that would raise a red flag to me. But now, because all the kids are talking about it and they're all encouraged to talk about sexuality, it's very difficult to know what the truth is. And I think, just like anything else, the real victims are the ones that fall through the cracks in this. And I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think so. And there's a lot of talk as though it's completely infeasible to do anything about this, but I have a really hard time accepting that. I think it's very possible to say, if a kid comes to you at school and says, I now want to go by Jennifer and I want to use she, her, then we have a conversation with that kid and we say, do your parents know about this? Maybe they'll say yes. Great. Well, then we can connect with the parents. We can chat with them. We can talk about what support they have, what's happening. Maybe they say no. Well, that's an opportunity for us to say, we should tell your parents, don't you think? Don't you think they would want to know this? And maybe the kid will say yes, but I'm a bit scared. I'm a bit embarrassed. Okay, well, here's a chance we can come in and again support the kid in helping them to have that conversation. But if they come and say, no, I really can't, and you explore it, we might find that there is some abuse there. And this is something teachers have done, because abuse is not new in this domain. Abuse is something that teachers are used to watching out for. Teachers are trained on how to do this. And if they have a bona fide concern that abuse might be there, we have a process that can be followed in order to handle that. But that does not mean that we need to withhold this from all parents just because.
Can I add something to you there, David?
Yeah.
You're right. Absolutely, Julia. And this is so sensical, right? And if anyone looks through the policy 1235, there is no bridging that gap. You go through the entire procedure, the whole policy is about how to keep it away from the parents. And even when it says people you should talk to about this, the parents are not listed. It is as if it is completely, that is the goal, is to keep it away from the parents.
100%. That's the most concerning thing. I think it's at the core of the issue. I think there's not involving parents. And of course, I've spoken this into my delegation. And the fact that you're not involving parents and you set a precedent, it's almost like, Julia, you said this, the school board is taking on a role. They think they're above everybody else. They're above the parent. They're taking the kids down this medical route, and there's no talking to the parents. Now, of course, everybody knows, just because you have, two parents, or I don't know, whatever, it doesn't mean that these parents cannot be abusive. Obviously, or on the on the other hand, just because you grow up in a one-parent household doesn't mean that you're not going to have a good childhood. So both of these are great possibilities. Obviously, there's a range of people out there who are good people and who are bad people, no matter what their background is. And some people grow up from a bad background, and they say, I want to be better for my kids. And then some people just can't do that. I found during my delegation too, I was really focusing a lot on these issues. I find the school board is hyper focused on the sexuality of minors, and I just don't understand. Now, I've done a little bit of research, and just publicly online, 30% of their time is spent just celebrating the sexuality of kids, and I'm wondering if that's the public number that I'm seeing. Like, what's the actual number? I think if you have teachers that are activists, it's probably going to be 100% of the time. And again, the big thing in the policy, I brought it up, is they're not consulting parents on any of this. And they just want to know the sexuality of minors. And I'm not cool with that, because I don't think kids should be sexualized from an early age. And I also have other concerns regarding the material that is there. And as you know, I've read from that book. Now, I've seen some pretty interesting replies from this, and I found their questions also shifted from, during my delegation, Trustee Woodcock shut me down because of concerns for human rights. And I was thinking, this book is approved by you and I'm reading it. So is the book like against the human rights, or is me reading from your book that you approved against the human rights? And then later on, near the end, Trustee Carla ended up saying, well, this book is helping kids who are abused. So we moved from like, this book is breaking human rights to this book is helping abused kids. And I tried my best to stick to the point and say, this is not appropriate. Now, the part where they tried to discredit me was saying, you didn't read the book, the whole book. What is the context? So here's my thing with that. I think if I hear about a book or a movie, let's say, it could be Franklin the Turtle. Now, Franklin the Turtle in the movie, maybe they throw in a sex scene over there. And then they say, well, we threw in this 30-second sex scene clip because we wanted to bring awareness to safe sex or whatever, right? And then I hear about it, and it's like, wait, I heard they have this movie, Franklin the Turtle, and there's a sex scene in there. I want to check it out for myself, see if this is real. Sure enough, the sex scene in Franklin the Turtle is there. So then I go to the school board and I say, why do you have this movie with this inappropriate sex scene? They're like, well, you didn't watch the whole movie. It's about a turtle that's trying to bring awareness to safe sex. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not gonna talk about things that are not a problem. I'm going to bring up the problematic issues. And as soon as I see like explicit sexual content, and we're not talking about like, this girl was raped by her father, going through stuff, it's like, it was pretty detailed. I have a hard time listening back. When I was editing the videos, I just had to like mute that part because I find it difficult to
not even as
listen.
not even as detailed as some of the ones that exist out there, David. Like, really, I mean, there's even worse ones out there.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I don't think their questions, I found their questions were mostly around the fact that they wanted to justify this behavior as okay, rather than, well, I don't think, I could see your point about how this might not be appropriate for children. And like, even they were disgusted by it. But, I think they had to stomach it and somehow turn that ship around and make it sound like this book is helping abuse victims. Julia, what do you think?
Can I tell a book story on my side? So I haven't been very involved in the book discussion because I'm late to the game on this. So I don't know a lot of these books. I often learn about them once somebody brings them forward as a delegation. But there is one book that I know some concerns have been raised about called The Hate You Give. And this is a book that I do know because my daughter actually read it last year in English class. And this was during the summer. She is ambitious, so she took summer school to get ahead, and she had to do a self-study for a book. And so she talked to her friends, and they recommended this book called The Hate You Give. And I didn't even think to look it up. I said, great. And I went to the library and got it for her. And my daughter thinks quite a bit like I do. So as she was reading this book, she kept complaining to me. She's like, I don't love it. Not the author, but the main character is very complainy and whiny, doesn't really seem particularly interested in solving things for herself. She's just complaining. And then one day I took a look at the book when it was on my table, and I flipped to the back and there was these study questions. And I found the study questions disturbing because it was all diving deep into race and trying to think about it from a very particular ideological sense and guiding you down that path. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is this book? And so then I went and read about it online and saw a lot of the complaints that people have about this book. And thankfully, my daughter's a very thoughtful, critical person. So we talked about it and what she saw in it and what she didn't like in it. But I also see that it's difficult to bring complaints forward, I think, because a book like that, what people often complain about is it has like 57 F-bombs or something like that. And they say, fuck the police and this sort of content, which isn't ideal. But for someone my daughter's age who's grade 11, okay, we can say, yeah, they use bad language. We shouldn't talk that way. And she understands that. What I find much more disturbing, though, is the themes, that the undercurrents of the entire book in terms of the message they're sending and the way that they're framing how we should be having racial discussions. And that is really hard to communicate. You can go to a meeting and you can do what David did of reading a passage and say, look, this is really gross and disturbing, isn't it? But I feel like if someone does get up there and says, look, the themes and the undercurrents of this book indicate this, they're going to say, well, we don't believe you. We haven't heard it. You haven't given any examples. Even I came home and look on Twitter and people's feedback from me is, well, you didn't justify what you said. You didn't point to the journal articles and they do exist, but you're right. I didn't have enough time in my presentation to do a dissertation on this. And so in that sense, I understand why the presentations go the way they do, which is, look, here's a bombastic, extreme example of what's out there, but this is out there. And this is something you can digest in 2 minutes and you can hopefully understand why this is a concern. And then they do exactly what they did, where they say, well, that's not in context. And for me, the context, sometimes that can matter. I compare it to television and something like violence, where sometimes I think violence is appropriate. I think back to Lord of the Rings and Boromir's death and what a dramatic scene that was, where he dies saving his friends. And it's not particularly graphic, but you see him get shot by an arrow. And I think that's good because of the message that it sends. So I can see the argument there. If it's not about the moment the arrow hits him, it's about the context around it. But there's a lot of other violence on TV. In fact, most violence on TV that I would say can be quite extreme and can go quite far. And even if you can say, but look, we killed the bad guy. Okay, but did we have to see the bad guy's body get ripped apart like that? Maybe we didn't. Last piece to this, I actually had something I haven't told either of you about yet, but earlier this term, my daughter was in a food and nutrition class. And she doesn't watch much TV, so we really don't have a lot of exposure to visual violent stuff here. And they did health and safety at the start of the class, and the teacher felt it appropriate to show some really, really graphic depictions of injuries. So this was people getting their fingers cut off, or one person had their foot getting stuck under a forklift, and you see their ankle get bent and blood shoot everywhere. And it's all staged, of course. This is not real, but it looks real. And that was the point, was to disturb them. And they're screaming in pain as this is happening. And my daughter comes home crying, and she wouldn't stop talking about it for 3 days because it really, really got to her. And that was the same kind of thing for me of, why is this appropriate? Why is this helpful? Yes, safety is important, but there's other ways to send the message of safety. And she's in a food and nutrition class. She's not going to use a forklift. We don't even need to be talking about forklift safety, but it's the way that those conversations went. And I think that it is appropriate sometimes to say, look at this. This is disturbing in and of itself. The context isn't what's important. It's that 3-second moment when you see the foot go into the forklift and get bent out of shape that is what sticks with you. And that absolutely can happen with some of the material that David has been reading. Not
to like belabor this, but I mean, absolutely. But with what both of you are saying, the thing that really upsets me, it's hard to digest the fact that these educators, these board members, can't appreciate how impactful that that one, even if it's just the one passage. Like we keep relaying this back to a movie, or there are amazing movies that I just cannot wait to watch with my kids. There are certain ones that we like the whole movie, but there are certain parts in it that just are not age appropriate for them right now. And so, like, yes, we could probably watch the movie and then fast forward through those parts, which there's been some times where that's what we do. We're like, okay, we know this is going to be a very scary part for them. And they often recognize that themselves. There'll be certain movies that they're like, oh, I don't want to watch, like Aladdin. Oh, I don't want to watch that one because of that one part. Okay, well, do you like the rest of the movie? We can just fast forward that part. And sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no. I know for me, I mean, there are certain things that I've seen in my life that I wish I never saw. And did I need to see them? Absolutely not. I did not need to see them. And so you could be watching, like David's saying, like Julia, you're saying that you're watching something or reading something. And I mean, it was a great movie, and it's too bad that that part was in it. I will never recommend this movie because of that part. Like, it doesn't mean that the whole book was bad. It's that, unfortunately, it may not be appropriate because that part still exists within the book, right?
100%. Those are the messages I've
Exactly.
gotten from parents time and time again. Even after the delegation, the number one thing was these questions that you were asked have, like, they were focusing so much on what is the context, that they completely missed what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. And it went over their head. And I had a little reply on Twitter, and this lady said, guess the school board didn't read the book they endorse, which is ironic because they have no idea. As a matter of fact, you saw one of the trustees, she didn't even know what this policy AP 1235 even had in there. They can't even vote because they don't even know what they're voting on, which was embarrassing. Anyways, so
but
this
you
lady
get attacked,
says,
right? Like, you get attacked as a parent with concerns. You'll get attacked for not reading a whole book. Yet these trustees who are elected and getting paid to be in those positions don't even know the policies that are being brought forward.
And this, by the way, this isn't like a self-help therapy book like they made it sound. Oh, we're bringing awareness to sexual abuse. It's like, I mean, I think we've talked about this enough, how that doesn't make any sense. But here's what this lady said. It's a scene of an abject child abuse by a father to his daughter. Such events ruined my mother's life. It's not reading for pleasure unless you are sick in the mind. So this goes to show that people who experience abuse, they want to move on with their lives. They don't want to revisit this. And if they do talk about it, usually they talk about it in general statements, right? Like, this is what happened to me and whatnot. The last thing they want is going into like the gory details of it. I mean, it's inappropriate. And when I see these trustees even getting asked, like, so do you want to ban the book? I mean, I found it so ironic how they're banning the classic books, right? I don't know. Right. I haven't double checked if the Waterloo District School Board did ban Dr. Seuss. I know there's a lot of people, but anyways, the main thing is they seem to be banning classic children's books. But when it comes to this hard material, like I said, it could be a great storyline, but the scene will just undermine the integrity of the book. Not saying the author doesn't have creative leeway, not saying that the book isn't good, not saying any of this. And maybe a person, an adult who's looking into this can appreciate the creativity and the details that it goes into. But to put a kid in that situation, I mean, come on. I think this is, at best, it's just the dumbest thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Can I say one other thing? I think this will be it on the book thing. But, I mean, when one of the arguments I know for the passage, you did the bluest eye, you did that on the 16th, and then I said, okay, well, I mean, if let's talk about the same book and let's take a passage that, because the one you chose, David, was quite conservative. like relatively speaking to what exists in that book, I mean, the one that I had for them, I don't ever want to read it again, to be quite honest. And I don't really want other people to have to read it if they've already decided, like, you know, this is enough. We don't need this in here. And yet they have to keep on hearing these passages. And so anyway, that one, that again, Twitter, you know, we were discussing it on Twitter, and these educators, not all educators, but the educators that are advocating for this stuff and saying that it's necessary, you know, their argument is that, oh, well, this is lived experience, you know, this is real life. This is happening. People need to understand, as hard as it is to look at it, we need to be able to look at it straight on and face it straight on. And then when I tell them, well, actually, it's not the lived experience of the little girl that was raped, because she was raped unconscious. Like, she's actually not experiencing any of this. The only experience that I got to get was from the rapist, and the pleasures that the rapist had and the sensations that the rapist had during this process. So, and then there's nothing to say about that, right? What's your argument then there? It's appalling. It really is.
And from an outsider's point of view, because as I said, I really haven't had much to say about these books, but as I've seen this play out for the last year and a half, it has seemed to me like I don't understand what the reason is to dig in on keeping them. There are millions of books out there. And if people have concerns with a few, even if you can raise an argument of maybe these concerns are overblown, so what? It's one book. What happens if The Bluest Eye isn't in our library? There's many other books, and people come and say, well, it's a cherished Black author. There are other cherished Black authors. She has other books herself. There's other books that can be put in its place. Why does that one in particular have to stay? And that's the part that's always been sort of most perplexing to me, is why there is so much digging into it in that sense. There's books that I wish were in the library, like Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier. That book came out in 2020. It's a fantastic book. It outlines rapid onset gender dysphoria. It's well written. It's accessible for a high school audience, and it's not in the library. Why can't that book be there? But not all books can be in the library. There's not enough space and there's not enough resources. So we already have to make some tough choices. And if people are really upset about this one book, maybe we just don't have that book. But yet, for some reason beyond me, people
Julia,
are diving
and that
in
book
deep
itself would be deemed inappropriate or harmful to certain communities. I would imagine that would be.
It's banned more than The Bluest Eye is.
And so, you know, if you want to talk about real life, like when we're talking about this is really happening, let's get some books. Let's get some graphic images on, you know, what it's like to have gender reassignment surgery. How about we get some of those graphic images up there? You know, when we're talking about, I had somebody on Twitter say something about, you know, romanticizing things, and it's like, you want to romanticize? How about I Am Jazz? Let's talk about romanticizing something. You know, I don't know.
I feel really bad for that girl. I just saw she has a TV series, and just can't get over the fact, even now after all these surgeries and everything, it seems that, according to her, just can't feel herself, just can't be herself, which is really sad, to be honest. This is way above my expertise as well. Professionals need to be dealing with this kind of things. Unfortunately, I think really at this point, the school is offering their way or the highway. And I don't know why this is the case. And yeah, it's a big problem. I think once you target the kids and you leave the parents out of the situation, you undermine anything that you want that is well-being, for the well-being, or say it, whatever, is just completely undermined.
Yeah, I think, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, but the two most telling things that happened in this particular board meeting, for me anyway, was the fact that we are absolutely not having the same conversation. Number one, to have the delegations, I'm very grateful for the delegations that came on that was kind of opposing what we're standing for, right? well, they think they are, I guess. But that's so telling, that we're not having the same conversation, because this isn't about not being truthful. This isn't about, being naive and ignorant to what is actually going on in life. And let's just, put our kids in a bubble and save them from that. It's nothing that has nothing to do with that. My delegation had nothing to do with LGBTQ. Neither did the one prior. The only times is when, well, let me explain myself, that I'm not talking about the LGBTQ community here. All of the examples that we gave were actually heterosexual examples. So I don't understand how it's possible to continually have this argument that this is an attempted attack on anyone. How this is trying to bring in specific views or moral ground into, like, we need to be having the same conversation if we're going to get anywhere. And we are absolutely, positively not having the same conversation here. Later, you guys had taken off, but later they went into this racist job fair that they have. And again, like, not having the same conversation. I'm sure there were people, maybe there were, or maybe I guess one of the statements was that people who are being, like, just the whole, argument that we're hiring people that aren't equipped for the job. And I think that's being misconstrued, because it's not to say that anyone who is from a different ethnicity other than white is not capable of the position by any means. It's just to say that you need to make an even playing field so that everyone can apply, and then, the best person gets the job, not based on race. And we're also not saying, because Ramsey and Mike Ramsey ended up, talking about how we can do this, that we can, have targeted hiring, like he's for targeted hiring, and that we can do this in a way that's not discriminatory. And so that's, again, we're not having the same conversation, right? Like, I would love to see more diversity in our classrooms. I would love that. But there's a better way to do it than to be discriminatory and to fight racism with racism. And that's the part that we're not having the same conversation. The second thing that I saw that was very telling was that this isn't about minority groups, and that this isn't about the children or having certain people belong within any of the labels that they choose to use, that this is absolutely about, you follow the narrative that we're giving you, and that's how you're in. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter your gender or anything else, as long as you follow our narrative. And if you don't follow our narrative, you're out. To see Scott's comment, I don't know how much more telling people need to open their eyes to this. To have a transgender
for all the viewers and listeners, Cristina is referring to Scott Pietowski's comment to Julia regarding if she is a minority, because he's blessed to have all these transgender friends that don't share the same thoughts as Julia.
Yeah. I was going to pull up the exact quote for him.
It was truly telling. Yeah. Do you want me to wait and then we'll read the quote?
If you want me to pull it up.
No, we got it.
I have it here.
People can.
Okay, I have it here. I am blessed to have a number of trans people in my life. I would have to say that their point of view is quite different than yours, and I'm wondering if you would acknowledge that perhaps you are a minority in the trans community. Okay, firstly, I thought this was all about protecting minorities. And secondly, I was so upset, Julia. I was so upset. And at the same time, it's like, this is exactly what we need for people to see how blind and hypocritical they are. This is not about LGBTQ. This is not about equity or diversity or including people. This is about a narrative and an agenda that they are pushing through, whether it is with good intentions. They are blindsided by it, 100%.
I just wanted to say something really quick. Every time I hear Scott speak or open his mouth, it just makes me laugh. That guy cracks me up. When he pushed this narrative regarding this race hiring stuff, he was saying people want to see themselves in the classroom. The students want to see themselves, aka if you're a black student, you want to see a black teacher teaching you. If you're a white student, I guess you want to see a white teacher, right? So I'm thinking maybe we should hire based on who's ever's qualified best, right? Because as I said, the color of the skin doesn't give you an indication that you're a good teacher. You could be white, you could be a terrible teacher, you could be black, you could be a terrible teacher. But the opposite is also true. You can be white or black and be a very good teacher. Having said that, if I was to hold Scott to his own standards, Scott would only listen to white men. So Scott, as a white male, hopefully you can listen to what I have to say right now, because you only learn best from white men, according to you, because this is your demographic. I would say get off social media, because you spend way too much time over there. And I think you need a little bit of a break. I think you need to go out and you need to touch some grass and you need to have some different viewpoints. That's all I got to say.
Like, in one sense, it was still an improvement. At least everybody was able to speak. They attempted to shut down a few of us during our delegations, but nobody was cut off entirely, which was nice. And I almost appreciated the comment that Scott made, because I think it let us know what we already knew in terms of where his head is at and where I think a lot of the trustees' heads are at. But by saying it kind of confirms that I may have been allowed to talk, but I wasn't going to be listened to because of how I'm seen and how I'm viewed by them. And for me, that is really telling, because they can agree with me. That's fine. But that's all the more reason why we should be in dialogue and we should be talking. On this call, I know that we don't all agree. There's lots of items that we disagree on, and we're not here because we're completely aligned. We're here because there's value in having conversation and finding areas where we can agree. And that is what I would want to see on any board and in any government system. And it feels to me as though there's just not an interest in that at this point. I've seen it in other school boards as well, but it makes it difficult to move things forward if people are going to be dismissed as a minority of a minority, mm-hmm. and thus their views not mattering.
To that point, and I think this is a really important part for people to understand and really listen to, because I had a lot of parents reach out and some teachers reach out after seeing our delegations, after seeing how the board responded to them, after seeing the delegations that were opposing, kind of standing against what we're trying to accomplish here and having our voices heard. Basically, like, these other delegations, for those of you who haven't seen it, are basically saying, stop allowing people to come up here and speak when it's against this narrative, because it's harmful. Stop allowing anyone other than the people who think the way we think come up here and share their thoughts, because it's causing harm. And so when we get to a place like that, that's really deflating. And I had a lot of people reach out, Cristina, what do we do now? Like, they're not listening. Like, people who wanted to delegate a little while back, like, they're like, oh, I want to delegate, but I'm nervous about it. Because it takes a lot to get up there, right? Like, even the time that it takes to put some thoughts together and get up there. And then not everyone feels comfortable public speaking. It takes a lot. There's a lot of people who have a lot of things to say. And just because you don't see them up there, it doesn't mean that they don't have those things to say. And then there's the whole, like, trying to protect their career and their livelihood, and they don't want to be ostracized. And I'm not saying that anyone should fear that, to be quite honest, because the best is on the other side of that fear. So step out of it for sure. But what I'm saying is that it is apparent, and it was made very apparent and clear to more and more people, that this board is not shifting. And so, I mean, we have two choices, right? Like, we have two choices then. I mean, those who want this, take it. Like, keep on going with it. Like, keep on going with it. Those who do not like the way things are, we have two choices. And one is to step up and continue to express our views on this and to have those perceptions, those perspectives seen and known and understood. And then the other one is to vote, right? And to vote no in a way that actually matters. So, I mean, I'm not talking about a ballot box. I'm talking about stepping up, stepping out. Like, if we're done with this school, if we're done with the school board, then we gotta retreat. We gotta get out and we gotta do something else. I mean, we can either continue giving this board a means to hear out the voice of, you know, the overall Waterloo Region District School Board community and try to make this work so that our children are getting an education that we feel is fit for them, or we want to break our contract with this corporation, right? Like, those are the two options. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I have some thoughts on this. I think those are great, viable options. The problem that I see with this is it's become more of a cultural thing now. And if you want to move in a direction in terms of private school and the government is just pushing their own ideology through the approved education material, this stuff is going to filter into the private schools as well, or any school for that matter. And I think at one point or another, it's going to be forced. So having said that, I do really enjoy a good fight, regardless if it's in private school or if it's in the public school system. There needs to be pushback against this ideology that's not in the school, but we're talking about it in the school. And everybody's going to benefit from the conversations that we're having. All right, before we wrap it up, I just wanted to get some final thoughts. Julia, I'm going to start with you. Is there something that you wanted to say that we did not cover?
Something I want to say that we did not cover. I think for me, it really is just the importance of being able to have conversations with people that you disagree with. That's good for all of us. That's good for us on these calls. That's good for us in our personal lives. And it's essential on governance boards. And what concerns me most is the pushback to prevent people from speaking if we disagree with them. I'm transgender, and there's lots of people who may not agree with that lifestyle choice that I have made. I don't even know if I should call it a lifestyle choice or not, but I'm going to. But regardless, I find that there's a lot of people who I can have conversations about that with. And yet so many people are called transphobic just because they have some element of concern with that. And for me, I think what's important is that we can have those conversations with people we disagree with. We need to have those conversations. And if someone is kind and is loving, that's what matters, not if we're in agreement on something like that. And we've somehow, I don't quite know how we got here, but we've somehow reached a point where we've said no. In the area of the LGBT space, we just can't touch these things anymore. Full stop. And I don't accept that, because the conversations are the only way we can move forward.
I agree. Cristina, any final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that. And you know, within kindness, I think truth is in there as well. Like, you know, kindness is truth and love. And that's important. Those are important things. We can't keep on just making everyone just feel more comfortable because it's the easier thing to do. Like, we really do need to have open and honest conversations, which is why I appreciate both of you very much. And then, you know, the other side is to make sure we're having the same conversation, because that's becoming more and more apparent that, you know, we're not going to get anywhere if we're not talking about the same thing. And I think so often with the polarized views, I see it from both sides. And I'm biased, but I'm seeing it mostly from the other side, where you're arguing about something, you know, with a position that you have believed and you want to believe. It's almost as if you want to believe, because we want to be right, that you want your thoughts validated, that whoever doesn't think like you or likes your ideas, that they want a different outcome. we want the same outcome. We want a good education for our kids. We want everyone to feel valued. We want them to know that they're valued, that they have purpose in this world. That's what we want for them. And we want them to be able to pursue that with great joy. And so, that is ultimately what those of us who, I'm hoping I'm having conversations with, even on the other side, want as well. And so just because someone doesn't agree with the methods in which we get there doesn't mean they aren't looking out for the same interest. And I think that we all need to be having that same conversation in order to move forward.
Absolutely. I completely agree with both of you, what both of you said. And I feel like I've learned a lot. Never in my life did I think that I'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with a person like Julia. Then we have Sue and Levy as well, who's absolutely doing great work on the board. She's a lesbian, and I had a podcast with her, and we're all pushing for the same thing. We're all so different, but I have so much appreciation for the work that everybody is doing. And everybody has their strong points, and everybody has a great perspective, and we really are coming together. And every time we're up there, I'm pretty happy with the way things have gone.
I want you to finish us off, David, but I can't help but not at least mention, because people probably don't understand how big this is, that you guys are both of you are here, and it's pretty huge, and I'm just really grateful for it.
Yeah,
do we want to go into that a bit?
Probably not today.
Yeah, we can save it for another time, because it's coming up. I got to pick up my kids from school.
Yeah, same.
But I did want to say that I do have a lot of appreciation for both of you, and there are other people out there as well who are coming up to the board, speaking about it. I know how intimidating it can be, because I'm up there and I have to overcome every time. I got to overcome the fear, and you just got to go in there and just lay down the punishment for them. That's how I view it. I go in there and it's like, no more. I will not allow this on my kids. And I see the same kind of courage and bravery from you two and from other people as well. So just to wrap it up, a huge thank you. And once again, thank you to all the viewers and listeners. If you've made it this far, I really encourage you to have a look at the delegations. They are on the YouTube channel. Please share them. I am getting censored like crazy, because obviously the things that I am saying and that are being said are not good words. According to the YouTube guidelines, very controversial, but I think it is very important that parents do know what is happening in the school system,